before we get to there, right, we have the Back to Basics putting segment. So one of the sponsors of the podcast called Back to Basics Putting Mirrors. Yeah, use code TM15, 15% off. Number one putting mirror out there, designed by Grant Field and Richard Woodhouse. It's got a 15-degree little putting arc on it there, Trottie, and you can also see your path to face relationship when looking down on it. Support those who support the podcast, TM15 for 15% off down below. Trottie, in the Back to Basics putting segment here, do you have a putting tip or something that you can share with us that might better our game or better our coaching in regards to, to take to the putting green? What have you got for us?
Can I ask a question first about the mirror?
Yes.
How do you know that 15 degrees is right for everybody?
Well, that's a great question. I think it was measured between PGA Tour averages between 12 and 19. So they cut it in half, 15. And then when they had the 15 degrees there, that's kind of where they drew the middle line. Now, you don't have to obviously use the 15 degrees exactly, but it does give you a good kind of a guideline, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, I like it.
Because most mirrors are straight and straight, right? So it's a glass mirror that sits on the ground. I'll show you it. I got it here.
Grab one. I'm interested.
Here you go. This is it here. Okay. So the guy who designed it, Grant Field, Cam Smith's coach.
Yeah.
So see the arc?
Yeah.
Here. So then this is the putter face alignments here that are 90 to the arc.
What happens if you're a lefty?
This one's not, but it's double-sided. So you flip it.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the other one in my bag there. This is actually a prototype. I'm not too sure if it's public yet, but we'll call it a prototype. It looks
sturdy because the problem with those mirrors is sometimes that they warp.
Yes. Well, this one is sturdy, and I will say this because it's not the cheapest one. It's probably the most expensive one, and it's quite hard, and it's one of those ones, and they're quite good as well. Like if you do break it, which is can get in your travel and can happen, right? They often replace it and look after you. So it's a proper one. It's not like those eyeline, or I shouldn't say that, like a cheap one that might just snap or break, or you know what I mean? You can feel like it's quite thick, and it comes with the gates as well. But anyways, that's enough promotion on that.
The thing is, though, it's important because you asked me then about a putting tip, and I have a video that I do that was shown to me by, I can't remember who, but it was about setting up launch monitor. And I'll do this one because we're doing an equipment thing, but you mentioned gates and you mentioned mirror, and basically I think gates and mirrors and chalk lines are essential. If you look at the best players in the world, that's what they're doing all the time. However, the tip I would give for someone is that you create your own launch monitor. So you take your cell phone, iPhone, whatever you use, put it on slow-mo, and you put it down and you put the ball in front of that with a Sharpie line on it, or you put the logo of the manufacturer or the model. You draw a line on the green. Then you go 2 golf ball widths, which actually is the same as this iPhone. I don't know what model it is. You put another line in there, and then you go 1 more golf ball and you put a line in there. So on the green, you have 3 lines. 1, which you're going to put the logo of the ball in and the phone on. The next one is 2 golf ball widths away, and the one is a ball width after that. 3 lines. You take a 15-foot putt, no target. You hit that putt. And what you're looking for is after the strike, the ball to have started. So if this is my TaylorMade logo or TP5 logo, as soon as you strike, you want that to have started to change degrees of angles. And then you want the ball in the air until, or landing as close to the second line as possible. Now, look, if you're playing on greens like Poana, which over here in the States, a bit bumpy, Torrey Pines, you might want that ball in the air closer to the third line. And then if you're playing somewhere that's filthy good, usually TPC Boston and places like that, you want that ball on the green rolling as close to line 2 as possible. So anyone out there who's listening to this, who's looking for a putting tip, without question, I'm going to stand there and say, get on your mirrors, get on your gates, do your stuff to make sure that's all dialed, get consistency. But at the end of the day, get the right loft on your putter, because you might just be missing because you've got too much loft on.
I think that's fantastic, and I think it's something that's definitely overlooked. What is the standard loft on a putter, Trottie? Is it 3.75? Is that what they're coming out at, or what is it? Do you know? I'm sure you know.
Yeah, if you're playing a mallet and you're playing on PGA Tour greens, you probably want a spider to be around 1.25 if you're on
Wow.
great PGA Tour greens. If you're moving to like medium PGA Tour greens and you've got a spider, you want to be on 2. If you're on Poana, you want to get to 2.25. If you're using a blade, because of the CG projection through the face. So if you think about it, this is like a mid mallet Del Monte, but you know
Yep.
the CG here is kind of here. But if you've got a
Mm.
blade, it's going to be closer to the leading edge, so you want more
Yeah.
loft. That's why you answered 3.75. So you can play your
Ah.
blades around 3.75, and as you move into better greens, you want to get down to about 3.25. But your mallets, which is why they generally roll the ball a little bit better, that and the fact that if you strike them away from the center, they're not going to twist as easy. Your mallets, you absolutely want to play them with less loft.
That's fantastic. Now, can you tell me what would be a side effect that would happen from a player that has a putter that on, let's say they got jumped on Poana and they didn't have enough loft on their putter? What would you see happen after they strike it?
So Jason Day had this when we went out to, we had his East Coast great loft on poor greens, and you're talking about one of the best. Well, not one of, in my opinion, the best putter I think I've ever worked with, without question. And
Yeah.
bottom line is that ball was just going into the turf, immediately up, and then bouncing. So it's bouncing. Like when you've got that camera on slow mo, that thing is just bobbling out of the screen altogether. So you got no control whatsoever, none.
Yeah.
But loft on putters, I mean, if Jason and John Rahm and those, but Dustin are checking it every week. I mean, I've got a Dustin putter spec on my phone for every tour stop he goes to, and we used to check it
Interesting.
every week. And it was like, look,
Wow.
mate, this is what you play here. This is why. This is what you played when you won. And he'd keep on top of it every week. And it's crucial. That, and to your point, the mirrors and the start lines and the gates, and just making sure that you're reading the greens the same as your caddy. That on tour is all big, big things.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So when a ball like so with less loft, about you say you get loss of control. I'll just kind of ask you a question here. I know the ball goes into the green, right? Does it also struggle with the start line of it as well? Does it skirt off to the side, or does it just kind of just kill it into the green, so it hasn't got enough loft?
Yeah, I think I missed the start of the question, but I think you're saying that when that ball bounces into the turf, what does it do? I think, yes, it's going to screw with the start line for sure. It's going to
Yeah,
screw with the roll, because the reason the putters nowadays all have these grooves on, it's not just to look
yeah,
fancy, it's to create forward momentum and forward roll, or get that
yeah.
ball into forward momentum as quick as possible. I think if you go back in time, and there's a slow-mo clip of Ian Woosnam when he won the 91 Masters, and you look at the putt he made, he used a Maxfly HT golf ball, which was gamer golf ball back in the day. But he hits that
Mm,
putt to win, and it's about 10 feet. And that ball is in the air without the Maxfly logo moving into forward motion for a long, long time. Look, that's how the equipment was back then. No issue. He
mm,
had one of those Tad Moore putters that would have had about probably 3.75 aloft on it. But the bottom line
mm.
is, unless you are using something nowadays that's come on, it's got the grooves in it and it gets it into forward motion, you're just not going to get the benefit that you can have of technology in the putter face, because you're not creating much ball speed with a putter. So it's all about
Mm.
friction. It's all about, path. If the face is off, and by path, I mean face. If the face is off, it'll impact it more than the path. It's the same as the clubs.
Yeah.
The face is what's going to give you major, major issues. So your man there who's got that 15-degree arc, I get it. But if the face isn't married up on those points in the mirror, then you're obviously toast. Which is why, I
Yeah.
mean, this putter I keep waving around, this is an arm lock. And that's why I keep coming back to this, because there are two things in putting, and we're getting into it now. But Jason
Sorry.
Day's a big one for this.
Yeah.
Lie and loft. But it's not necessarily lie of the putter. It's maintaining the lie angle throughout the stroke. So if you look at Jace, like,
Oh.
he's very much in a perfect posture. Everything
Mm,
looks symmetrical and aligned,
mm.
and then his head
Yeah.
doesn't move, and he's able to get that thoracic spine just doing what I'm doing there without anything moving. Now, when I putt, it's flipping this and it's this
Yeah.
exaggerated. But the bottom line is like, The reason these guys go to the gym so much is the core gets super strong, and then they're able to disconnect the thoracic and the spine, disconnect the movement, and get everything
Mm,
sort of going separate. And I think if you look at Jace, which is another great training drill, he has like a steel wire that he puts out. That if he's putting on here, this steel wire runs along the golf shaft, and he just keeps the golf shaft on the same lie angle as it's moving through the stroke. And then you
yeah,
don't lose the face plane tilt, which we've seen in drivers when you change lie angle, but you're also less likely to manipulate the loft. But that's why I think that it's no surprise to me, like lab putters and the broomstick, how it's done so great. The broomstick is sort of getting going again because it's just easier to keep that thing in a great loft and lie if you can get efficient at doing it. And I think the same
yeah,
can be said for arm lock as well. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of guys going to claw and things like that, because all you're doing is you're locking in the path and the lie
yeah.
angle and the face.
I have never thought about it so much in the lie angle side of things. And I think when you definitely see Jason Dane, I want to ask you why you think he was so good. That was one of my questions actually on the TaylorMade guys, is he's so deliberate in his setup position, right? Like when you're working with him and you're watching him, when you're helping him with his putting, trying to get the putter specs right, does he take that same deliberate setup routine all the time?
Yeah, and obviously Cole Swatton was out a lot with him during the time I was out there, and Cole was great. He would be amazing at keeping the crap out. You know what I mean? Like
Mm,
on tour, there's so much. Like we're deep in the weeds of these conversations wouldn't happen on tour. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
I've taken it there, but you couldn't. Like Colin doesn't want that for his player. And then I think the answer to your question, yeah, you've gone to routine, which on the outside looking in, of course, that's the obvious answer. But the reason Jason Day was the best putter I think I've ever seen was all his mentality. He just
Mm,
was very strong willed that that ball was going to roll the way he wanted it and it was going to go in the hole. I only ever saw him struggling once, and he was extremely short tempered with himself, extremely hard with himself, and he wasn't in a mood to have polite BS conversation. Like he was
okay.
fixing this issue and fixing it quick, and you needed just to get out the way and let it be,
Yeah.
or adjust stuff to help him. But what you're doing needs to be factual and correct. And he wasn't
Yeah.
just going to take anyone's word for it. And there was a sensor motion product that I spent loads of time on, and beat myself up on at times to please the sensor with the ratio of the stroke
Mm,
at different positions. I remember
yeah.
chatting to Jace about it once in Palm Springs, and Jace said, "Oh yeah, I had to go on that. I used it once." And I was like, "What do you mean you used it once? Like they reckon this thing is the best product ever made?" And he's just like, "Yeah, my stuff didn't match up to that. I'm not using it." That
Interesting.
mentality, though, is something I
Mm,
didn't have. Like I've
mm,
spent, you know, we talked about it. I haven't played golf for a long time, but I've spent a lot of time coming back into the game, trying to please a launch monitor, please a
yeah.
sensor motion, please the mirror. The only thing you got to please in this game is the golf ball. And it's like,
Yeah.
if you can do that, the best players, well, guess what? You become one of the best players in the world. It's not like there's no further
Mm,
on. You become those guys, the reason they hit it so good. And you obviously saw Tiger go out there and that famous thing about the divots, no divots. Tiger's played tournaments taking divots bigger than anyone in the game.
yeah.
You know what I
I've got
mean?
plenty
He
of proof.
doesn't
Yeah.
care. He's
Yeah.
pleasing the golf ball and he's hitting the shot. And I think when you get to people that are listening to this podcast,
Mm,
I do think that they're going into a world which I love. I'm in it. You're in it, but it's
mm.
deep. Like there's a certain type of golfer that's in here, and sometimes you just got to look at what the ball is doing in order to find your way out of a problem. You know?
Yeah. And to kind of, close on that back to basics putting segment, I really like what you said there and the way that Jason's approach is to it, because it seems to me like he looked at it and potentially subconsciously or consciously said, if I spend some time on this, am I going to get better at putting? You know what I mean? Like, is this actually going to make me better? And he probably looked at it and went, you know what? I know what works. I don't need to be told that I'm putting good, or need to be told that I'm not putting good. You know what I mean? And it's just like, I don't need it. take it
So
out on life because
I spent some time 2 weeks ago with Michael Phelps, right? The Olympian,
yes,
best Olympian ever.
yeah,
And
of course.
he said to me, on his route to achieve what he achieved, he couldn't listen to anyone because the truth is, nobody's achieved what he wanted to achieve. So who can he
Love that.
turn to for advice? Because he's the one who's going to do it. And he's going to do something that no human has ever done. So who the hell does he go to? And it was like an eye-opening moment to be like, wow, that's kind of like the mentality you got to have when you're not playing well. You're the
Yeah.
one who's got to get out of it, you know?
That sounds very tigerish. But to close off on the back to basics putting segment, thanks for that, Trottie. It was fantastic. I love that tip. It's going to go. It's great. The guys at Back to Basics are going to love that one. Support the podcast. TM15, 15% off. Links are down below.